Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I'm one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by my co-host Bryan Smith for episode number 101. Now we're past the
Nice.
milestone episode, so it's all downhill from here.
Until 1,000, and who knows where we'll all be then. The Cubs won't
Dude,
exist as an organization then, or something.
exactly, dude. I apologize to listeners out there. I posted on social media after me and Zumac recorded the episode last week. I went into edit. I was using Audacity to edit all that good stuff, and I was like, man, my audio sounds a little bit weird. I was like, why does it sound weird? It was because I didn't use my mic to record live. This was episode number 100. I've recorded 220 episodes of podcasts as a host before. And on that episode, I forgot to use my mic. I had my mic like in front of my face. It was great, but it wasn't actually plugged in. So you didn't get any microphone audio. So hopefully I'm linked up. I should be linked up to the mic today, and we should be good to go. But I was like, how appropriate is that for episode number 100 that I
Yeah,
start coming up?
exactly. Of all the ones.
Exactly. All right, today we got a fun episode today. Actually, we're talking about a lot of the top prospects in the organization today. I know that I don't know. We get some people out there really wanting us to talk about top prospects and guys that are close to the majors. We really have people out there that are also like, man, talk about prospects 50 through 70, and like you know we love talking about those guys too. But today the storylines kind of dictate that we talk about some top prospects. We're going to dig into Cade Horton and his MLB debut. We're going to talk about Jaxon Wiggins, who will maybe soon be the top arm in the system, and his outing this past week. And then we're going to talk about two, let's call them infielders for now, question mark, James Triantos and Jefferson Rojas later on in the show. And we'll talk a little bit about the time of the year that typically warrants some promotions, and we'll wrap up the show with that talk. So I think it's only appropriate to start to lead off here with Cade Horton and his performance from Saturday on his MLB debut, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, much anticipated. I think Craig Counsell and Jed Hoyer tried everything they could to get the Mets off the scent that it was going to be Cade, and then opting to use Brad Keller as an opener and have Horton miss the top of that lineup. They got very cute with it.
What were
But
your thoughts on that?
I more than anything, it was kind of like a slight just eye roll that, of course, they had to make it cute. I feel like if I had one complaint about how the Cubs have developed Cade Horton over the last couple of years, it's just that they treat him with a nervousness that I don't see them do with any other prospect that I can remember. If we made a list right now of how many pitchers in the Cubs system this year that have thrown more pitches in an outing than Cade Horton ever has with the Cubs, I think we'd get to like 12 names, I bet you. I just saw Will Frisch, who's just back from 2 years off with Tommy John, just got over the mark that Cade Horton's ever gotten to. And you could say that about so many guys. And so it just seemed like another bullet point in that very sort of nervous direction. But the top of the Mets lineup is something to be scared of. And so if you're going to use it, it does make sense to use it against them.
Yeah, I was running some of the numbers. This is something that I'm going to try to put together at some point. I don't know if this is a video or something I write or just tweet and blue sky and post out there. But I was looking at some of the numbers of the prospects throwing in the system as far as the pitch counts that they're allowing their pitchers to go. Nas Muley has gone like 82 pitches on average per game. It's 82, 84, something like that per game. It's like you're not allowing Cade Horton to get above 78, and you're letting Nas Muley, who's coming off of injury, Tommy John a couple of years ago, new to this pitching thing, and he's going in the 80s on average. Like, that seems weird. But yeah, I mean, the opener thing. What made me maybe the most upset about the opener and using Brad Keller in the first inning was that people online, how dare I listen to what people are saying online, but they were like, oh man, like I thought he was supposed to be this bulldog, and they're not even letting him go in the first inning against the top players on the Mets lineup. It's like, yeah, but it's not his decision. He's not making that decision. He's not going to Craig Counsell, his brand new manager, and saying, hey, please don't pitch me in the first inning. Like, that's not happening. Yeah, I mean, it made sense on the surface where it's like, oh yeah, like those are Francisco Lindor, Juan Soto, and Pete Alonso. Like those are rough hitters to face in your first 3 plate appearances as a pitcher in the major leagues. But I also thought the wrinkle of pitching out of the bullpen, whether it's not a true relief appearance or not, the pitching out of the bullpen didn't really like that offset anything you gained from not facing those guys the first time through the order. So I don't know. That was all interesting to me. Overall, Cade Horton, 4 innings pitched, 4 hits, 3 runs, 0 walks, 5 strikeouts on 77 pitches. And so, I mean, really,
and noteworthy, I think that he pretty much just went with what was comfortable. He just went fastball slider. I mean, he showed one changeup, I think, maybe
he got a
3 or
swinging
4
strike on
curveballs.
one changeup. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And just a couple curveballs, but it was just him sort of in his bag, just doing what was comfortable. I thought location of the fastball was really solid for a first start. You know, you didn't see those nerves with really big misses. I think he had 10 called strikes off his fastball or something, so he was dotting it pretty good. And then of course just the one mistake. You know, he's at a level now where that one mistake gets punished and it gets hit a really long way. And you know, Brett Beatty, who's struggled in the major leagues, but was a top prospect just like Cade was, got him for it. And yeah, I mean, he's going to have those moments. I think home runs are something that he's going to manage and work on avoiding. He can get so, you know, this, Greg, like he can get so in the zone with his pitches where he's just not, he's throwing sliders in the zone, just trying to like be efficient and not mess around. And sometimes you kind of want him to bury those pitches a little more.
Yeah, me and Zumac talked about it last episode in preparation for his debut, and I had said that Cade is a guy that the stuff is good enough to work in the zone, but it's not good enough to work in the heart of the zone consistently. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, man, home runs are going to happen for Cade in the majors. He just needs to not nibble. And as long as he's not nibbling, then he's not putting guys on base through free passes, and those 3-run home runs end up being solo shots. And so that's really important for him. I don't know how you can come away from that performance, even with the 3 earned runs over 4 innings. I don't know how you can come away from that performance thinking anything but that was a really impressive MLB debut for Cade Horton.
Totally. One thing I will note, Lance Brozdowski's been all over this for a couple of years, is the difference in the minor league ball and the major league ball does lead to some changes. And we've praised Cade Horton's fastball for being back this year. It was a little like the bottom 25% of fastballs he threw were just sort of on that border of maybe not being a plus pitch. You know, when it's 94 and a half and the ride isn't quite there, it can get a little flat on him. We saw a few of those in this outing, but we also saw a few of what we've seen in AAA this year too, you know, 96, 97s with good rides. So that's something to watch is if he's here for a month until Shota's back, you know, how does that fastball, can he get the floor of those fastballs up a little bit?
What'd you think about him rocking number 22?
You know, I doubt very much that Cade Horton knows almost anything about Mark Pryor. And so, and it would be weird, I think, for a Cubs employee to say, hey, that number you like, are you aware of this history with this number? Like, you know, I think it just ended up being one of those funny coincidental things. But it is certainly apropos.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, no way. So I mean, really, I tweeted this out. It's really Logan Watkins' number, not Mark Pryor's number, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
That's the important thing.
Nash Mervis.
Mash Mervis, who, dude, I mean, completely unrelated to this podcast, but I mean, well, kind of related. Was listening to the Cubs game on the radio here before we hopped on the show, the Major League Cubs game, and fun week against the Marlins where you've got the Hall of Famer Pat Hughes on the radio call for the Cubs. You've got Alex Cohen is on the call at least tonight for the Cubs on TV, friend of the podcast, and you've got Jack McMullen on the radio call for the Marlins against the Cubs, also friend of the show. So pretty fun weekend as far as listening to Cubs, listening to friends of the Cubs on Deck podcast call baseball games at the major league level.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love how much shine Alex is getting lately. It's been really fun.
He's been as good as he was at the minor league level. Like he's rolled that over. I didn't expect anything different, but like he's rolled that over perfectly to all that enthusiasm and what he brought to the table in AAA in Iowa. He's also bringing to the table at Marquee, which is like I love that, man. I love that.
Yep.
I think it's so cool. All right, let's talk about the guy that might be later this year the top pitching prospect in the Cubs organization. That's Jaxon Wiggins. And this past week, he had another really strong performance. He's a guy that, and we'll get
Best
into
one
this.
yet?
Yeah, probably best results for sure. Best results for sure. He went 7 innings, giving up only 3 hits and 1 earned run, 0 walks, 7 strikeouts. He went 87 pitches. And maybe the most notable stat of the entire outing is he had 20 swinging strikes, which is an outrageously high number. Like that is a really impressive stat for him. On what was that on Wednesday night, maybe on Thursday night. So, what was your biggest takeaway for Jaxon Wiggins?
Well, I'm going to turn it back to you
last start?
because I think you found some really great context behind those 20 swings and misses, and one of the reasons that the start was so successful happened to do with maybe the opponent's strategy.
Yeah, dude. I did not watch this outing live. I went back and did the classic thing. I think you did the same thing,
Yep.
where I was watching the outing. I had it on my phone. Take advantage of that add 15 seconds button on the broadcast, and so I was
Yep.
just zooming through the start, and I was sitting there. I was like, holy cow, the Fort Wayne Tin Caps are swinging at everything. They were swinging at so many pitches that Wiggins threw. Now, granted, he was hovering around the zone a lot too, way more than normal, so that contributed. But I was like, man, they're just swinging at a lot of pitches up there. And so I dug into the numbers and looked at the swing percentage for opponents against Jaxon Wiggins in his 6 outings so far this year. So how many of the pitches that Jaxon throws are swung at by the batter? Very, very simple stat. So throughout his first 2 starts of the season, Jaxon Wiggins' opponents were swinging 42% of the time. Then they bumped it up to 51% in start number 3, then went down to only 38% swing percentage in his 4th start, and then 44% in his 5th start. So basically 50% and below entering game number 6 of the year for Jaxon Wiggins. In the start this week against the Fort Wayne Tin Caps, they swung at 60% of the pitches they saw, 60% of the 87 pitches. And so when you swing that much, when Jaxon Wiggins has stuff as good as he has, he is going to generate swinging strikes. Those whiffs are going to come if a team swings as much as they are. That's never been a concern of mine for Jaxon Wiggins. Is
Right.
if a guy swings, will he be able to hit it? No, like these guys won't be able to hit it all that well. And so that was something extremely notable to me, is that teams aren't going to be swinging 60% of the time at Jaxon Wiggins pitches as he continues to climb the ladder. But that was notable for me in watching that outing.
Yeah, I mean, 60% swing rate against a guy who's had, a high double-digit walk rate in the past is just, it's just a questionable approach at best. But, to be fair, he was around the zone a lot. I thought it was one of his best ever outings in terms of command and his
Yeah.
mechanics. We talked this offseason about, the importance for him getting stronger wasn't so much to add velocity, it was to add sturdiness in his mechanics. I thought a lot of times he just was like flying through them, and you saw so much more control in his lower body and his delivery in this outing. It wasn't perfect. There were a couple pitches I sort of flagged in my notes along the way, but generally speaking, looked so much cleaner, and the results showed, and so that was a huge positive step for me. My personal hope is that it's enough for him to get the bump to AA, where, he'll face offenses that won't have, very silly approaches against him and challenge him a little more. I think he's ready to meet those challenges and to adjust to those types of hitters.
You mentioned the fastball specifically, that you liked his control of that pitch this
Yeah.
week. Yeah, no,
Yeah, the fastball was really good, and then I thought the changeup was excellent. I thought the slide, it was actually probably his worst outing of the year with the slider, in my opinion, at least
agreed.
of the ones that I've watched. And but the changeup was solid enough, and the fastball was just too much. And actually, if you look at in the past when the Cubs have promoted guys, it is oftentimes following an outing where they just can eat with the fastball. Like if you
Yeah.
can just totally get by with the fastball at a level, that means you're too good for the level. And to me, that's what this outing showed.
Yeah, I was gonna say getting that many swings and that many swings and misses and just living in the zone like showed that his stuff is too good for this level. It
Yeah.
showed that he wasn't being challenged in the lower levels of the minors anymore. I think that I would not be surprised if those of you listening to this episode on Tuesday morning or Tuesday afternoon find that Jaxon Wiggins has been promoted up to Knoxville. Now, we know that with Knoxville, we probably won't find out until first pitch of of their game. But I'm excited to find out if he does get that promotion because yeah, it's kind of how I felt with Cade Horton a couple of years ago in terms of like what Cade was showing in the lower. It was. I remember Cade at Myrtle Beach when he was just throwing fastballs just down the chute every single pitch. You mentioned earlier the slider too, but like the fastball was just he was just
Yeah.
using his
Middle.
second best offering, middle,
Yeah.
like throughout an entire outing, and I was like, what is this dude doing in Myrtle Beach? And that's to a lesser degree, but that's how I feel about Jaxon Wiggins in South Bend right now. Get him up to Double A. I think that he'll have some struggles in Double A
Yeah.
Knoxville. I think that he'll find some guys that are more advanced approaches at the plate. You'll find more BJ Murrays than guys that towards like the back end of the South Bend lineup. I mean, there's a difference between high A and double A in terms of those hitters that you're facing. We hear it a lot when you're talking about pitchers, right? And when you're talking pitching development, it's like, oh, the lower levels, like it's just guys using their good stuff. And then once they reach double A, they become like true pitchers and learn how to sequence and learn how to like spot their stuff. And but the same can be said for hitters as well. Like they learn how to improve their approach once they reach the upper levels of the minors. And so um yeah, I'm thinking like BJ Murray, like Darius Hill is a guy. Obviously, both those
Yeah.
guys have struggled in their time in Iowa, but like facing guys like Darius Hill and BJ Murray are different. Like they're
Yeah,
different
I mean,
cats,
guys can just see spin so much better, and
Yeah.
so that slider that sort of, I don't know, maybe it's a 1-1 slider. In a huge swing pitch kind of thing. You either,
Mhm.
fall down 2-1 or go up 1-2. You're not going to get chase on that 1-1 slider nearly at the same rate in double A that you do in high A. And it's
Yeah,
little things like that that make huge differences.
for sure. Anything else you got on Wiggins before we move on to the position players here?
I'm really just interested to see what they do with his slider shape. I saw in this outing, like there's some that are pretty horizontal, there's some that are pretty vertical. This was something that Cade Horton kind of went through during his development. I think when he came to the Cubs, it was a much firmer slider that had more like vertical drop. The horizontal was, if I'm remembering right, it was more like sort of 6-8 inches. Cubs, but then you would see some that were horizontal, and I think the Cubs saw that and they said, "Hey, we want to go in that direction." And so they made it a very horizontal sweeper type pitch. Backed off the velocity a little bit. It's more like 12 to 15 inches of horizontal break. I think Wiggins is sort of in that in between zone right now of them trying to figure that pitch out. He has a really great ability to spin it. They just have to find that shape of it, and that's when he'll probably take off.
I agree with that completely. I think that's a good point. All right, James Triantos. Let's talk James Triantos.
Yeah,
Because we haven't really talked about him hardly at all on this podcast so far this
yeah,
year, and the reason is he's scuffling at the plate so far this season. He went through a stretch for about a week and a half, I think it was, where he was out of the lineup because of some leg issues, but he's back in the lineup. This past week, he saw time in center field. He got 2 games in center field last week. He's up to 3 games in center field so far this season. And I'll go ahead and lump in the 2 different talking points of James Triantos that we're going to hit on here. The new MLB pipeline list came out. The top 100 ranking came out from Jim Callis and Jonathan Mayo. And James Triantos was left off of that top 100, which is not super notable by itself, but I think is worth a talking point today, knowing that Jim Callis has been really high on James Triantos since the day he was drafted. He has always talked very highly of James Triantos, included him in the top 100s for a long time now. So I think it's worth bringing up here today. What do you want to hit on first? You want to hit on the center field thing? Do you want to hit on the pipeline thing? Combination of both? What you got?
Let's talk about center field first, because I think that's an exploration of his role that I think what's interesting to think about is, are the Cubs doing that for themselves, or are the Cubs doing that as a marketable trait? And I guess my personal opinion would be that it's more focused on the organization and where the needs are right now in the organization, not necessarily having that outfield depth. I mean, Ian Happ, might be hurt right now. And, I think there was talk of, okay, if Happ goes down on the injured list, who do the Cubs call up? Like, they don't have a very natural next call up. Alcantara's on the 40-man roster, but he's not been playing that great. Owen Casey's been playing pretty good, but it seems like major leagues would be a huge jump for him right now. Like, the Cubs could use another player there. And I think like exploring if James Triantos gets hot, if he could be that player, I think makes some sense. I also think, when they start thinking about the 2026 season, there's so much similarities between John Birdie and James Triantos. So if you just start building James Triantos to check all the same boxes for an organization that John Birdie checks, I think that makes sense as far as like thinking through how he can help the 2026 version of this team.
For some reason, I hadn't once thought about James Triantos and John Birdie and how they relate to each other. I mean, I think like that's a good point. I hadn't really thought, but and that is a good example of utilizing young, cheap players instead of going out and signing a guy like John Birdie. If you have a John Birdie at home and James Triantos, you don't have to go out and sign John Birdie to take up a bench slash starting spot on your roster. And so, yeah, I think that so I posted this on social media the other day, that James Triantos had played 2 of his last 3 games at the time in center field, and I got a lot of questions about, oh, is that in preparation for the major league roster? Is he ready to get called up in that role right now? Is this as an alternative if the Cubs were to trade away Kevin Alcantara at the deadline, then you're out a center fielder and James Triantos can be that guy? And I think like the answer is like yes to all of that and no to all of that at the same. Like I think it's just I think the way that they're handling James Triantos isn't a pointed effort. It's not where like they're like, oh, like we need to get him reps in center field to make him experienced there to be a backup center fielder to Pete Crow Armstrong, or we need to showcase him to other teams that he for sure can play center field. I think it's just one of those things where like you look at James Triantos' profile and like the type of player that he is, he brings more value in general if he can play multiple positions. I think that's like what they need to do with him in general. If he's a second base only, then I think he has less value because he's not a plus defender at second base. Then where he can gain that value defensively is being able to play second, being able to play center, being able to play left and right, and maybe some third if you need him to, and things like that. And so I don't think it's a direct effort to fit in with a roster being your own or another team's. I think it's just like that's where his value lies, you know?
Yeah, I think increasingly it's probably seeming to the organization like it's probably unlikely that for a big market team he ends up being one of the 9 starters in the next 2-3 seasons. Yeah. And so how do we make him fit as one of those other 4 roster spots? And the way that you do that is that you add as many different skill sets to the pie as possible.
I don't think that James Triantos leads a trade package for a top of the rotation starting pitcher at the deadline.
And well, so, I mean, that gets us right into the pipeline discussion, yeah. I mean, because it is a question of how high of a prospect is he right now. And, I would tell our listeners, like, I would have Jaxon Wiggins as a better prospect than James Triantos right now. I would say that the guy that we're going to talk about next, Jefferson Rojas, is like, he's probably 50 plate appearances from having that feeling like that's pretty locked if the progressions he's making stay the same. Kevin Alcantara and Triantos were close to me in the offseason. They're probably still somewhat close for me, but I think I'm the only person in the world that wouldn't have Alcantara firmly above him at this point. So, I don't think it's crazy that he was dropped out of the top 100. I would also say I would put some caution over the fact that like he's struggled, but not in that many plate appearances. And when I look at the pitches, I mean, you can pretty much boil down his struggles at AAA so far to the 4-seam fastball. He has a 0.69 WOBA on 4-seam fastballs this year, and a 17% whiff percentage, which would be real high for him on that pitch. that's just not going to continue. I mean, he's going to
Mhm.
be able to hit four seamers for at least like, I mean, at least a 200, 250 WOBA, something
Yeah.
like that. And that would raise the whole profile quite a bit. It just seems like he's been late a bunch on those pitches this year. I think he's just been sort of caught in between his approach a little bit. And he's going to heat up and that profile will look a little better. I think it's both probably too soon to like give up on him as a prospect, but also you probably don't want to cling to the idea that like you trade Nico Horner to open up a spot for a guy like this, because we are probably seeing that as I remember you talking about this offseason, like comparing those two is slightly doing disservice to how great Nico is.
Yeah. I actually don't think I'm any lower on James Triantos right now than I was before the season, honestly. Like I
Yeah.
obviously he hasn't been great offensively so far this year, but like I wasn't he was outside my top 5 prospects in the organization. He was after the Owen Casey's and Kevin Alcantara's, and I think I dropped Jefferson Rojas just below him just because of the uncertainty with the injury
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
coming off last year. But yeah, I don't think that I'm sitting here today like, oh, like we're more worried about James Triantos than I was 3 months ago.
I would say that I thought that there was a chance that Triantos was going to have like an out of the gates, like I'm competing for the batting title in AAA, like I'm leading the league in strikeout rate. Like even as young as he is and as good as that level is, there is part of me this offseason that's like, are we undervaluing how talented these bat to ball skills are? And like the part of me that's dropped him a little bit is the part that's being answered with like, no, probably not. Like he's really talented in that department, but he's probably not like top 1% of all professionals at the highest two levels in that department either.
He is so much more difficult for me to evaluate than like Owen Casey. Because
Yeah,
like Owen Casey, he hits the ball really hard, and that like we know that's a skill that works in the major leagues, no matter
right.
if you're whiffing a ton or not. James Triantos, like crazy bat to ball skills, even if you're amazing at it, don't always translate to the big leagues, And like I don't know, like it's he is really really difficult to evaluate for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, anything else Triantos related?
No.
All right, let's go to the other infielder then. And this guy's actually an infielder, for sure. Okay, well, actually, let's talk about that. Jefferson Rojas is currently tearing the cover off the ball down in High A South Bend. He is, as of this recording on Monday night, he's propped the batting average up to 300. He's propped the OPS up to 900, which is, I believe, fourth best in the organization, third best in the organization, something like that. Been really, really strong, especially after a strong week this past week where he was named Midwest League Player of the Week. He had 2 home runs on Sunday. He's just looking great, man. And he was included on MLB Pipeline's top 100 list at number 78. But part of what I want to talk to you about with Jefferson Rojas is, again, the positional thing. He has played most of his games this season at second base. He's played 11 games at second base. He's played 7 at shortstop, but he's also sharing an infield with Christian Hernandez. What's your take on overall about Jefferson Rojas and his season this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll start offensively. I think the thing that jumps out to me is what jumped out to us when we talked about Christian Hernandez starting out really well early in the season. It's that we're seeing the power manifest by more fly balls pulled in the air. I think if we had to boil down what likely was the focus for Cubs, hitting coaches with players in the low minors this offseason, like one thing they must have really stressed this spring training was the importance of like when you elevate the ball, you're going to do your most damage if you pull it. Rojas's overall fly ball percentage is actually down. He's hit a lot more grounders than he hit last year so far, but he's pulling the ball more, and he's particularly pulling the ball on those fly balls a lot more than he did in the past. And that's the same thing we saw with Christian Hernandez early. That's started to maybe level out a little bit. Probably will with Jefferson too, as that sample gets a little larger. But I do think that's a focus, and that's a really smart focus by the Cubs, because when we have talked about Rojas in the past, like the importance of him getting to league average power for his position is, I think, really important to his overall prospect profile. And now I think he's starting to show that that's more likely than it's ever been.
something I'll point out when you bring up the pulling the ball in the air comparisons to Christian Hernandez is that Christian last year, while the strikeout rate was down for him, the swinging strike rate was not actually down all that much. He was still swinging and missing quite a bit. And so a lot of times when you're incorporating pull side in the air, that typically coincides with swinging and missing a little bit more often because you're having to make a swing decision earlier in order to get the ball in the air on the pull side. And so with Jefferson Rojas last year and the past 2 years, he's been one of the best in the entire organization at swinging and missing. I believe last year finished second in the entire organization in his swing and strike rate, which is it was like he was in the same breath as James Triantos and Brett Bateman, maybe. I think it was those three guys up top as far as
Makes
the
sense.
lowest swinging strike rate. And so Rojas can afford to cheat to pull the ball in the air a little bit more and watch that swinging strike rate go from like 7% up to 11% or whatever it is versus Christian Hernandez already sitting at 15%. He can't afford to go up a few more slots because then those strikeouts really will start to pile up. So that's something different between these two players, but I like that they're both going out there and doing that in the early going though, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what you're talking about. I think that the inside baseball term for that is like getting your contact point earlier. And that's something that like changed David Bodie's career once upon a time, for instance. Like that was a big focus back then. And it makes sense to make that a focus with these two. And you asked about defensively, I don't know that I don't know that position breakdown so far tells us a ton that we didn't know, which is that Rojas's body was probably trending towards away from shortstop in the long term. I think we were pretty adamant for the last year that Hernandez was a better defensive shortstop than Rojas. I don't think that was always necessarily like a widely accepted opinion, but something that I think we felt pretty confident about. And I think the Cubs' actions probably show that they believe that too. I think Rojas makes a bunch of sense as a second baseman, body type wise. It really fits. I think he's looked pretty athletic this year. I think a little more athletic to me than he looked last year. I think he kind of grew into the weight that he added prior to the 2024 season a little bit. And it just, I don't know, it's just working a little cleaner this year. And I think like continue to play some shortstop, but kind of view him as the second base prospect, I think makes sense.
I think that Brad mentioned it in the 1060 West Discord channel. Maybe it was there, that there is some Alexander Canario in Jefferson Rojas's follow through in that swing. When he hit his, I think it was his second home run on Sunday. I could see it a little bit. And so I don't know. I like that. Rojas has a really pretty swing from the right side. One of the prettier swings in the system, I think.
Yeah.
A lot of times you're associating like a pretty swing with a left-handed stroke, but yeah, Rojas is a good looking and always has had a good looking swing from the right side.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the probably what caught my eye first in watching him down in Myrtle Beach. I was like, this swing is just really fluid. The
really
load
balanced.
is really good, really balanced. Yeah, it's just the swing is really good. And so if he can keep showing up some of those power numbers and in addition to the lower swing and miss, then I think we're looking at a pretty damn good prospect. Yet again, I don't know when that promotion ultimately happens up to AA, but that could transition here into some talk about some promotions because we'll get into. I want to talk about Christian Hernandez and Jefferson Rojas as it relates to promotions, but first I want to address that we've gotten a lot of questions, and Zumac and I very briefly talked about it on last week's episode. That right about now, mid-May to early June, is when you get a good wave of prospect promotions throughout the system in past years. Like that's kind of the time where you're seeing guys that were either just not properly assigned to start off the season. They were assigned a level lower, or guys just really start breaking out. Like this is the time where you start to see promotions. Right. And you and I were sitting there, and I think you brought up, you're like, hey, let's talk about prospect promotions. And I was like, yeah, hell yeah, let's do it. I think that's what we should do today, is talk about who deserves a promotion. And you and I were both kind of going through the system, and not a whole lot of guys that like blatantly stand out, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the obvious one, which is Jaxon Wiggins, which is a guy that both you and I all offseason thought was going to be a double A. Then he got to spring training, and we started hearing that he was better than he's ever been, and it was like, okay, double A is a lock. He dominated in many spring training outings against double A teams. It seemed like the most obvious assignment in the system in some ways. And then he went to South Bend. He's been hugely successful. He feels like the one that was misassigned, right?
Yeah.
When I look through the statistics of all the four teams, I can't really. I mean, I couldn't find 5 names for sure that felt misassigned to me. I mean, you start to really sort of reach for relievers that have done well, but yeah, I mean, I think generally speaking, like guys are getting properly challenged now, which is both a positive for development, but also a negative, maybe that you could say for the system that we haven't had, those dominant breakout performances that we were hoping for in multiple places so far.
Yeah, just for funsies, I'll run through. I shot a text to you about some names that have caught my eye a little bit, and uh, on it, like hands up, like these aren't the sexiest names as far as promotions up the ladder, but they all seem to kind of fit in a couple different categories. The first category is the Jaxon Wiggins category, where like they probably had an argument to be assigned to a level higher than what they were to start off the season. That is BJ Murray Jr. is down in Double A Knoxville. Obviously, he's proven that he's too good for that level. He has not proven that he can hit Triple A yet, so he's probably due for a promotion at some point when there's space up there. Leo Espinoza is another guy that I had slated for South Bend to start off the
Yep.
season. He was signed down to Myrtle Beach and has been pretty damn good, pretty consistent. He was consistent all year last year for the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, and he's been batting in the 3-hole a lot for the Myrtle Beach Pelicans. Where Leo Espinoza is not a 3-hole. I love Leo, but not a 3-hole hitter. He's due for a promotion up to South Bend when they get a chance. And then the other two guys that stand out to me are Cameron Cisneros, who has been on an absolute tear over the past probably 2.5 weeks now for Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
He's I think almost 4 years older than the average hitter in the Carolina League. He's due for a promotion up to the Midwest League in South Bend. And the last name is Nick Dean, who's been in South Bend. I had him slated alongside Jaxon Wiggins for Double A Knoxville to start off the year. I just thought he looked really impressive last year, and he's been good yet again this year in High A South Bend. And so I think
And
that
Nick, I think has been better than his. Like, if you just look up his like sort of
yeah,
straight line, like his ERA, I think is right around 4 or something.
mhm,
But it's been way better. I mean, he's probably among the system leaders in terms of swinging strike rate.
yeah.
He's gotten a bunch of swinging
And he
strikes
was
even to
last year
start.
too. He was
Yeah,
last year. He had a really good strikeout to walk ratio. He had a lot of swinging strikes, and so
yeah.
I don't know. I think I really dig Nick Dean. I think that he's a really good pitcher. We've talked about him last year quite a bit too. Where it's like I don't know if ultimately he's a starting pitcher in the major leagues, but like I think that he's a dude that can get outs in Chicago or in the major leagues at some point down the road. And so
Well, and
I
kind
think
of like
he,
we talked about with Wiggins, like he has a super plus pitch in his changeup, and he needs to go to a level, I think, where hitters are more attuned to smelling that pitch a little
mhm,
earlier. And sometimes he'll throw changeups to righties
yeah.
in high A that like those guys they don't even see it coming. Like, it's like true Bugs Bunny behavior where it's like they've swung 2 times before it even gets to the plate, it seems like. So yeah, I mean, I'd like to see that change up against double A hitters personally.
The other category of player that probably deserves to be promoted are just, like you said, relievers. And we talk a lot about relievers on this podcast, but I'll just mention a few of them. Yozan Okendo probably deserves to be promoted up to Double A Knoxville. He's been lights out for South Bend. And then from Knoxville up to Iowa, Mitchell Tyransky has been very, very good. I think he finally allowed a run
Yeah,
in his
he
last
did.
outing. But he had like 14 and 2/3 scoreless to start off the season. It was no Frankie Scalzo Jr. start to the year in Double A, but it was pretty damn good. He probably deserves a promotion up to Iowa. And then the other name that I think warrants a little bit more time. I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. Is Riley Martin in Triple A, and I'm not advocating for him to be promoted up to the majors. And the Cubs have obviously signed Drew Pomeranz, and they've brought in the lefty from outside the organization to kind of fulfill a need. Luke Little is already on the 40-man roster and down in AAA. But I'm looking at Riley Martin, and I know like the glaring thing with Riley is the walk rate, right? The walk rate is still upwards of I think 15%, which is way too high to be promoted up to the major league level. But everything else about Riley Martin is really good, and so I think that at some point you look at Riley Martin and you're like, he's still getting results, he's still been successful despite that walk rate. I just don't really see a scenario where he's going to drop that walk rate sub 12%. I don't think that's going to happen for him. And I would love at some point if there's
Do you mean because the walk rate's already so high that it's going to get there, or do you think he's just a 12% or above walk rate kind of guy?
Like that's my thinking. I think that's just who he is, and I just love to see how that could potentially play at the major league level to like see. Now's not the time. It's not going to happen now. But like, I guess my question for you is, if he's still rocking a 14, 15, 16% walk rate and still getting success, does that warrant a call to the major leagues at some point just to see if it can play up there?
I don't think so. I especially given the fact that he's not on the 40-man roster, you really, as a left-handed reliever, like, one of the more specialist roles in the sport, you have to beat the door down to the point that there's no doubt. And, Riley, if we're going to call Riley a 12% guy, that's just not beating the door down. And Pomeranz and Tealbar have been really good lately. Little and Cosgrove are on the 40-man roster. Jordan Wicks fills some sort of role if they need a lefty look out of the pen too. It would be really hard for me to imagine a scenario where he gets there this season. I think what a guy like Riley's fighting for is being so good for a long stretch in the second half that he gets added to the 40-man roster before the Rule 5 draft. And then when you're on, it's so easy to get those looks back and forth. But getting on mid-season when they're always going to be anticipating the next injury and that crunch, it's really hard to do. And Riley's, he's just had like 2 outings this year out of 11 outings. He's had 2 that have just put enough doubt probably in the mind of the front office that like they make the other 9 not really count. And now we're starting at 0, I think.
That's a really good point.
It'd be a real stretch.
Yeah, that's a really good point about you can't have blow-ups. And while he hasn't had many of them, when they happen, they do tend to outweigh the other string of really good outings, which that's a
now
good
maybe like Riley pitching really well makes the Cubs more likely to DFA Tom Cosgrove when they have a 40-man crunch.
Yeah,
and now that's one less lefty there, and then you have an injury, and then maybe there's a scenario where one of those guys goes on the 60-day IL and you have another spot open up. Like, you could get those cascading series of very specific events that make it happen, but his job right now, for all intents and purposes, is to be as comfortable as possible living in Des Moines as he can be and succeed enough to be a 40-man candidate in November.
The city's always buzzing there, so the S is maybe silent.
S is.
All right, the last thing I wanted to hit on here today then is let's flip it back to Jefferson Rojas and Christian Hernandez and this promotion talk, because both guys were guys that were, I think, entering the season, we were talking about, is Jefferson Rojas going to be assigned to AA Knoxville? Will he be assigned to South Bend? He's killing it now. And then Christian Hernandez was a guy who we entered spring training thinking, okay, like he's going to be assigned to South Bend. That's all good. But then because of a strong spring training, just put a little bit of thought in our minds, like, might we see him up in Knoxville to start off the year? Obviously, we did not. But at what point does that become time for those guys to get bumped up to Knoxville?
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had access to like the internal metrics that they use to make those decisions. I think they're far more specific than maybe Z does. I think they're far more specific than just a batting line and a number of games, or it's complicated, complex stuff that makes those decisions. However, I'd say, if we get to that first half of the minor league season, which is in, sort of mid-June, and one of these guys are really still like head and shoulders sort of above league average level at high A, I think challenging them with a promotion makes a bunch of sense. I mean, with all these guys, like, the clock on when you have to get added to the 40-man comes faster than it feels like. And so those decisions, like getting as much info about these guys as possible, is pretty important. Like, you really have to balance this is like the hardest thing about development, right? Is you have to balance like being cautious and and keeping guys in sort of safe little bubbles while also challenging them and learning new things and moving them up that ladder. And so those guys are sort of right in that middle zone of like, what do the Cubs pick? And I hope that they spend the second half of the year in Double A, even if it feels like for both that jump is going to lead to some struggles.
All right. Then I ask you this: who gets the call first to Double A Knoxville, and is it before or after July 1st?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think Rojas is going to be the first one. He was the first one to high A. I think they coach Christian behind the scenes in really specific ways, and I think that they've actually gotten him to really buy into the deliberate process by which they develop him. Rojas, I think, is a little more expedited, and so I think he's up first. Man, July 1st is a good one. I'm going to say that it's right before that.
Right before July 1st?
Yeah.
And then, okay, then Christian, do you think before or after August 1st?
I would say after right now, but he can he can change that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the nice part about it, like one of the fun reasons why we can do this is there's nobody in Double A that's really like blocking them from being called up.
Is
With
that
all
a
due
nice
respect,
thing?
yeah, I don't know. For this very specific reason, it's a nice thing. The Double A Knoxville lineup is not exactly the prettiest thing. Well, for what it's worth, the high A South Bend lineup is not exactly the prettiest thing of all time either. I mean.
Yeah.
You got Christian and Rojas up top. Ivan Brennauer has been fun to watch, but after that, it's not a whole lot of fun in the lineup in terms of like top prospects at least. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that June sometime, mid to late June is what I'm thinking for Jefferson Rojas. I think that I don't know. I'm curious to see. Didn't we have this last year with Christian? Didn't he get off to a really hot start? Down in Myrtle, right? And then he kind of cooled off a little bit. Not even cooled off, just kind of leveled off a little bit.
Yeah.
And then ultimately did get promoted later in the year. I think we're kind of on pace for something very similar with Christian this year, where he got off to that scorching hot start in South Bend. And then for the past like week and a half, 2 weeks or so, he's been just kind of getting the job done. He's leveled off a little bit. So give me like maybe mid-August for Christian getting bumped up to Knoxville. So what I think that does is I think that that allows when Rojas gets bumped up to Double A, I think that allows both guys to play shortstop on a daily basis. And while Jefferson Rojas is probably ultimately a second baseman, maybe a third baseman, maybe a corner outfield, I think it does not hurt to have him play a lot of shortstop for the time being and just like prove that he can't play there, I guess. And for the same reason, like have Christian be your shortstop every single day and not have to slide over to second base or take more days off or whatever it is. Have both guys for that time from June to August or whenever it is manning shortstop at their affiliates for every single day for those couple of months,
Yeah, absolutely. I hope, man, if we get to a point where those guys are in Double A, it means that they've succeeded to a point that they're like sort of very real prospects at a new tier than what we're talking about now, and that's an exciting, realistic possibility.
All right, man. Anything else you wanted to hit on before we wrap up?
One other guy that I think could warrant a call up, that just like sort of an end of podcast note that I've been really impressed by this year, is Owen Ayers, the catcher in in Myrtle Beach. Owen's really solid. He's got athleticism. I saw him make one of the better catcher defensive plays I've seen all year in a game I was watching. I think it was probably, I don't know, maybe the third week of the season or so, and his hitting has been really consistent. He's got a consistent plate approach, it seems like, and I think he's would totally make sense to me as a guy that moves up to South Bend at some point.
I compared his athleticism to Bryce Wyndham.
Yeah.
I think that it reminds me a lot of Bryce behind the plate.
Yeah, with even like a little more like physicality than Bryce had.
For sure.
And maybe a touch less athleticism, because we could go on and on about how athletic Bryce was, but maybe a little more of like a true sort of baseball profile to have some big league dreams to still hang on.
I'll reach out to Bryce and get his thoughts on Owen Ayers. I think that'd be appropriate.
Yeah.
I'll have Bryce do some breakdowns of Owen Ayers behind the plate and have him come on the show.
Does the IV apps login still work?
I'll check in with him. We'll see. All right, man. Anything you want to plug here?
No, I actually did write an article. I came out of what are we calling? It's not retirement. It's whatever Michael Jordan did when he was in the middle of his gambling suspension. No, just kidding. So I published a piece at Bleacher Nation about Cade Horton, sort of similar format that I did for years at Bleacher Nation, about just what to expect with a guy and sort of give the history of how the Cubs developed him and what he looks like now. And so, yeah, give that a read if you haven't seen it yet.
Dude, I don't know if you listened to last week's episode with me and Z, but we were talking about how we love and needed a what to expect when you're expecting Cade Horton post. And like a few days later, you came out with it. I was like, oh,
I know. I kept it quiet on you. I wrote it to be honest, I wrote it like a month ago and was waiting on, I just changed a couple sentences as he sort of evolved over the month. But after like 2 outings in Iowa, I was just like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen quick. And, I called him the top prospect in the system on the show and just kind of felt compelled. And so over like commutes to work over the course of like a bunch of days in mid-April, I wrote that post and then just edited it as we went. So it was in the hopper, but it was sort of a secret, like, am I gonna go forward with this? And I'm grateful that the Bleacher Nation still sort of lets me just pop in occasionally.
I love that. Is he still your number one prospect in the system?
Well, I said that when I was thinking Matt Shaw was destined
true.
to not be a prospect anymore. I would have Shaw first and Horton second. By the way, I would have Jaxon Wiggins fifth.
So you'd have we're getting off the rails here. So you have Shaw, Cade, Moises, Owen, and then Jaxon.
Yes,
makes sense. I think it'd be hard to argue against that, honestly.
I mean, Pipeline's arguing against it with their rankings. I think that's slow to recognize Jackson's step forward.
That's fair. All right, well, we'll wrap things up there. This show, the plan is to be back on the air a week from today, but I'm officially on baby watch, so we'll see. We'll see if I am back on the air this time next week. I don't know how much my wife would appreciate it if I am back on the air, because that means that we're still sitting around waiting. So, but in the meantime,
Frankie Huss coming soon.
Yeah, so I'm sure Scazzo will really appreciate that one. In the meantime, check us out on social media. You can find me at Out of the Vines on Twitter, on Blue Sky. Bryan is over there at Cub Smith on Blue Sky. Check us out over on the 1060 West Discord channel. Lots of fun over there. Follow us on or subscribe to us on YouTube. We really appreciate you guys interacting with us over there. Give us a like, give us a comment below on what you hated about this episode. That's always super fun. Give us a subscription on Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. Can't thank you guys enough for tuning in for the next 100 episodes of the Cubs on Deck podcast. So thanks, guys, and we'll talk to you soon.
Go Cubs.
Yo.